Mark settled deeper into his worn armchair, a contented sigh escaping his lips. Sunday afternoons were sacred. A half-finished book lay open on his lap, a mug of steaming coffee rested on the side table, and the gentle sunlight streamed through the window, warming his face. It was a stark contrast to the awkward, slightly tense conversation he'd had just last week. He'd been firm then, resolute. He didn't do games, he'd explained, and he certainly didn't date younger girls. The age difference was too significant, the life stages too disparate. He valued maturity, genuine connection, and a shared understanding, things he just didn't see possible with someone so young. He'd felt a pang of guilt, of course. Lily was bright, bubbly, and undeniably attractive. He wasn't blind. But he knew himself, knew his boundaries, and knew what he wanted in a relationship. It wasn't a fleeting fling or a youthful infatuation. He wanted something real, something lasting. And that, he believed, required a certain level of experience and emotional intelligence that came with age. He'd hoped she understood, respected his decision, and moved on. He certainly hadn't expected her to, well, he hadn't expected what happened next. The peace of his Sunday afternoon was about to be shattered, his carefully constructed principles about to be tested. He took another sip of his coffee, oblivious to the impending storm, the challenge to his carefully curated world. He was comfortable, secure in his decisions, unaware that the doorbell was about to ring, signaling a complete shift in his reality. A cheeky grin was on its way, ready to turn his world upside down. The insistent buzz of the doorbell jolted him from his reverie. He frowned, mildly irritated. He wasn't expecting anyone. Setting his mug down, he padded towards the door, his brow furrowed in question. He glanced through the peephole, and his heart skipped a beat. It was Lily. The memory of their last conversation flooded back, sharp and clear. He'd met her at a friend's birthday party. She was vibrant, energetic, and immediately drawn to him. He'd enjoyed her company, the easy laughter, the light flirtation. But as he learned more about her, her age, her aspirations, he knew he had to put a stop to it. He remembered the cafe, the clinking of cups, the awkward silence that followed his explanation. "Lily," he'd started, choosing his words carefully. "You're lovely, truly. But I'm just not the right guy for you. I'm older. I'm in a different place in my life. I'm looking for something serious, something with someone who has a little more life experience." He'd emphasized the life experience part, hoping she'd understand without him having to spell it out. He talked about the importance of shared values, of being on the same wavelength. He'd skirted around the issue of her age, not wanting to hurt her feelings, but making his point clear nonetheless. "I'm not into games," he'd stated firmly. "And I'm definitely not into dating younger girls. It just doesn't work for me." He remembered the disappointment in her eyes, the way her smile faltered. He'd felt a wave of sympathy, but he'd stood his ground. It was the right thing to do, he'd thought. Now, standing behind his closed door, staring at her through the peephole, he wasn't so sure. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Whatever her reasons for being here, he needed to be prepared. He straightened his shirt, ran a hand through his hair, and opened the door. The sight that greeted him was unexpected. Lily was even more striking than he remembered. Her bright, bubbly energy was still there, but it was tempered with a newfound confidence, a subtle sophistication that hadn't been present before. She traded her usual casual clothes for a fitted dress that hinted at curves he hadn't noticed before, and her hair, usually pulled back in a ponytail, cascaded down her shoulders in soft waves. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. It was her demeanor. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, and a playful smirk danced on her lips. There was a self-assuredness about her that was both captivating and slightly intimidating. It was as if she knew something he didn't, as if she held all the cards. "Changed your mind yet?" she asked, her voice light and teasing, but with an underlying current of challenge. He was speechless. The words he'd carefully rehearsed, the reasons he'd so eloquently articulated last week, vanished from his mind. He could only stare at her, his thoughts a jumbled mess of surprise, confusion, and undeniable attraction. The cheeky grin she wore seemed to say, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And in that moment, he truly didn't know. The power dynamic had shifted, and he was no longer the one in control. Lily's transformation was complete, and she was ready to play. He just wasn't sure he was ready to play along. His silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Part of him, the logical, rational part, screamed at him to reiterate his previous stance, to politely but firmly decline her invitation, to shut the door and pretend this never happened. But another part, a more primal, impulsive part, was captivated. He was drawn to her confidence, her playful challenge, the undeniable spark in her eyes. He felt a pull, a magnetic force that threatened to override his carefully constructed boundaries. He knew it was wrong, or at least, he thought he knew. He was a man of principles, a man who valued maturity and experience. He wasn't supposed to be attracted to someone so young, someone who represented everything he thought he didn't want. But here she was, standing on his doorstep, radiating a confidence that belied her age, challenging everything he thought he knew about himself. He could see the effort she'd put in, the deliberate transformation designed to appeal to him. And it was working. Damn it, it was working. He wrestled with his internal conflict. He wanted to say no, he knew he should say no, but the words wouldn't come. He was caught between his head and his heart, between his principles and his desires. The logical side of him argued that this was a mistake, a recipe for disaster. The impulsive side whispered that life was too short for regrets, that sometimes you had to throw caution to the wind and embrace the unknown. He looked into her eyes, searching for an answer, a sign, anything to help him make a decision. All he saw was a reflection of his own internal struggle, a mirror reflecting his deepest desires and his greatest fears. And he was still speechless. Lily's smile widened, sensing his hesitation. "Cat got your tongue, Mark?" she teased gently, her eyes twinkling. She wasn't pushing, but she wasn't backing down either. She was giving him an out, a chance to reaffirm his earlier decision, but she was also making it clear that she wasn't going to make it easy for him. I don't know what to say," he finally stammered, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "How about come in?" she suggested, tilting her head slightly. "Or maybe I'm glad you're here. Or even just a simple hello would be a start." She paused, her gaze softening. "I thought about what you said, last week. About the age thing, and the maturity thing, and all that." He braced himself, expecting a lecture, an argument, a plea. But instead, she simply shrugged. "I get it. Sort of. But I also think you might be missing out. You're judging me based on my age, not on who I actually am." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm not some silly little girl, Mark. I'm smarter than you think, more capable than you give me credit for. And maybe," she added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "just maybe I could surprise you." She was challenging him, not with anger or resentment, but with a quiet confidence that was far more compelling. She wasn't trying to change his mind, she was inviting him to reconsider his assumptions. She was showing him that she wasn't just a number, she was a person, a complex, intriguing person who deserved a chance. And he, for the first time, was starting to believe her. He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. "Come in," he finally managed, the words barely a whisper. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Lily's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of triumph crossing her face, quickly masked by a polite smile. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the familiar space, taking in the books, the artwork, the comfortable disarray that spoke volumes about the man who lived there. The atmosphere in the apartment shifted, charged with unspoken tension. The air crackled with possibilities, with the weight of their previous conversation and the uncertainty of what was to come. Mark closed the door, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. He turned to face her, his heart pounding in his chest. "So," he began, his voice still unsteady, What exactly did you have in mind? Lily shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but her eyes betrayed her excitement. I don't know, she said, her voice light and teasing. Maybe we could talk. Maybe we could get to know each other better. Maybe, she added with a playful grin, we could just see where things go. She was leaving it up to him, giving him the power to decide the course of their interaction. But he knew, deep down, that the choice had already been made. He had invited her in, crossed the line, and opened the door to a world of possibilities, both exciting and terrifying. He just had to decide if he was brave enough to step through it. The comfortable, predictable life he'd known just moments ago was now a distant memory. The game had changed, and he was no longer sure he knew the rules. He led her to the living room, the same room where he'd been so content just an hour ago. Now, it felt different, smaller, the air thick with anticipation. He gestured towards the armchair, but instead of sitting, Lily wandered over to his bookshelf, her fingers tracing the spines of his favorite novels. You have good taste, she commented, pulling out a worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude. This is one of my favorites. He was surprised. He hadn't pegged her as a Gabriel Garcia Marquez kind of girl. Really? He asked, his skepticism evident in his voice. Really, she confirmed, turning to face him, her eyes sparkling with intelligence. I read it last summer. What did you think of the ending? And just like that, the conversation shifted. They talked about literature, about philosophy, about their views on life, love, and everything in between. He found himself drawn to her insights, her perspectives, her surprisingly mature understanding of complex issues. She was articulate, well-read, and possessed a sharp wit that kept him on his toes. He realized he had underestimated her, judged her solely on her age, and missed the depth and complexity that lay beneath the surface. She wasn't just a pretty face, she was a fascinating, intelligent woman who challenged him, intrigued him, and made him question everything he thought he knew. The initial tension began to dissipate, replaced by a genuine connection, a shared intellectual curiosity that transcended the age gap he'd been so focused on. He was starting to see her, truly see her, and what he saw was far more captivating than he could have ever imagined. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation deepened. Mark found himself opening up to Lily in ways he hadn't anticipated, revealing vulnerabilities he usually kept hidden. He spoke about his loneliness, about the pressure he felt to conform to societal expectations, about his fear of ending up alone. It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm missing out, he confessed, his voice barely audible. All my friends are getting married, having kids. And here I am, still single, still searching for something that feels real. He paused, looking at Lily, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I thought I knew what I wanted, what I needed. But now I'm not so sure. He admitted that his rigid rules and self-imposed limitations might have been a way of protecting himself, of avoiding the risk of getting hurt. He built walls around his heart, convinced that maturity and experience were the only keys to a lasting relationship. But Lily, with her youthful energy and unexpected wisdom, was challenging those walls brick by brick. He confessed that he had been lonely even before Lily came to his door. The peace he thought he felt was actually emptiness, and the quiet of his apartment was a constant reminder that he had no one to share it with. He saw that he had been so focused on what he thought he wanted that he'd closed himself off to the possibility of something different, something unexpected, something potentially even better. The fear of being wrong had kept him from being open to the possibility of being truly happy. Lily listened patiently, her eyes filled with empathy. When he finished, she reached out and gently took his hand, her touch surprisingly comforting. Maybe, she said softly, maturity isn't about age. Maybe it's about being honest with yourself, about knowing what you want and being brave enough to go after it. Maybe it's about being open to new experiences, even if they scare you a little. She paused, her gaze intense. And maybe, she continued, genuine connection has nothing to do with age. Maybe it's about finding someone who sees you, who understands you, who makes you feel alive. Someone who challenges you to be a better version of yourself. She argued that societal norms were just that, norms. They weren't laws, they weren't commandments. They were simply guidelines that people chose to follow, or not. She challenged the idea that age automatically equated to maturity, pointing out that she knew plenty of older people who were far less emotionally intelligent than some of her friends. She emphasized the importance of individual connection, of finding someone who truly gets you, regardless of their age or background. She suggested that he might be denying himself a potentially fulfilling relationship simply because it didn't fit into his preconceived notions of what a relationship should be. She wasn't asking him to abandon his principles, but rather to question them, to reevaluate them in light of his own feelings and experiences. She was giving him permission to be happy, even if it meant defying expectations. Mark looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a young girl trying to manipulate him, but a confident, intelligent woman who was offering him a chance at something real. He saw her genuine affection, her willingness to challenge him, her unwavering belief in the power of connection. He knew that choosing to be with Lily wouldn't be easy. There would be judgment, whispers, and disapproval. He would have to defend his decision, explain himself to friends and family, and potentially face criticism from strangers. But as he looked into her eyes, he realized that the potential rewards far outweighed the risks. He was tired of being lonely, tired of playing it safe, tired of living a life dictated by fear. He wanted to experience passion, excitement, and genuine connection. And he believed, with a certainty that surprised even himself, that he could find all of those things with Lily. He took a deep breath, a sense of calm washing over him. He knew that this was a turning point, a moment of decision that would shape the course of his future. He had a choice to make, to retreat back into his comfortable, predictable world, or to step into the unknown and embrace the possibility of something extraordinary. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He gently squeezed her hand, a small gesture that spoke volumes. "Okay," he said, his voice filled with newfound conviction. "Let's see where things go." A slow smile spread across Lily's face, her eyes sparkling with delight. She squeezed his hand back, her touch warm and reassuring. "Good," she said softly. "Because I think we could be really good together." The rest of the evening unfolded naturally, effortlessly. They ordered takeout, laughed at silly jokes, and shared stories about their lives. He learned about her dreams, her aspirations, her fears. She learned about his passions, his regrets, his hopes for the future. As the hours passed, the age gap seemed to fade into insignificance, replaced by a growing sense of intimacy and understanding. They discovered shared values, similar senses of humor, and a mutual appreciation for intellectual stimulation. He found himself drawn to her infectious optimism, her unwavering confidence, and her genuine kindness. He knew that this was just the beginning, that there would be challenges ahead. But he also knew that he was willing to face those challenges, to navigate the complexities of their unconventional relationship, because the connection he felt with Lily was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. He was no longer afraid of the unknown, no longer bound by his self-imposed limitations. He was free to embrace the present, to explore the possibilities, to simply be happy. He had changed his mind. He was ready to play. And he had a feeling that this was going to be the most exciting game of his life. As the night drew to a close, Lily stood by the door, ready to leave. The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes, filled with unspoken promises and shared anticipation. Mark walked her to the entrance, his hand lingering on her arm. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "For tonight. For everything." Lily smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thank you," she replied. "For changing your mind." He leaned in, his gaze locking with hers. The air crackled with electricity, a silent invitation that neither of them could resist. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "So," he whispered, his voice husky, "same time next week?" Lily's cheeky grin returned, wider and more radiant than ever. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said, her voice filled with playful confidence. He leaned in closer, his lips hovering just above hers. A shared laugh escaped them, a sound of pure joy and unadulterated happiness. It was a laugh that sealed their connection, a promise of shared adventures and unforgettable moments. Then, he kissed her. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, a gentle exploration of uncharted territory. But as their lips met, the kiss deepened, a silent declaration of their feelings, a promise of a future filled with passion and excitement. As they parted, breathless and exhilarated, they knew that this was just the beginning. Their unconventional relationship was just starting, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The door closed softly behind Lily, leaving Mark standing alone in his apartment, a contented smile on his face and a heart full of hope. He was no longer alone. And he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring.